It started like any other quiet Wednesday. The sun was shining lazily through the curtains, and I was sipping my usual morning coffee at the far end of the backyard, right under the oak tree that shaded the porch. From where I sat, I could see the small two-story home I had quietly handed over to my son and his new wife a year ago. I never told her I owned it. My son knew. It was part of a long-standing plan, a promise I'd made to him years ago when he was struggling to get on his feet. He wanted to give his wife the feeling of independence and ownership, and I respected that. So, the deed stayed in my name, quietly, legally mine, while they built their new life under its roof. I never interfered. Never poked around. Just helped out silently whenever I could, cleaning the gutters, mowing the lawn while they were out, fixing a leaky pipe here and there without making a fuss. She probably thought I was just the old man next door with too much time on his hands. And that suited me just fine, but things changed. Subtle at first. The way she would look at me, like I was some kind of burden. Like my presence in the backyard was something she had to tolerate. My son had gone out of town for work, one of those out-of-state corporate training things that left her home alone for the week. I figured I'd help out while he was gone. I was sweeping leaves off the front steps that morning when she came outside, arms folded, eyes hard. "You can't just come here unannounced," she snapped, not even bothering with a hello. I raised my head and smiled politely, brushing off the insult. "Just clearing the path." "It's slippery after the rain," I replied, trying to keep my voice calm. She didn't soften. "You need to leave. I don't know who gave you permission to just show up like this." It was strange. I had always been careful, always respectful. I never crossed boundaries. But in her eyes, I was suddenly trespassing. I tried to explain, gently. "Your husband knows I'm here. I always help out." She rolled her eyes and stormed back inside. I thought that was the end of it. Maybe she was having a bad day. Maybe there was something going on I didn't understand. I chalked it up to stress, but the next day, it escalated. I came over to check the water heater in the basement. It had been acting up again, and my son had asked me to take a look before he left. I let myself in through the back gate and headed down. I didn't even make it to the bottom step before I heard her yelling. "I told you not to come here," she screamed from the top of the stairs. I looked up, startled. "The heater, your husband," he said. "I don't care," she shouted. "You're not welcome here. I'm calling the cops." At first, I thought she was bluffing. It didn't make any sense. We had never had a single real conversation, but she had never been this hostile. I slowly walked back up the stairs, hands raised to show I meant no harm. "Let's just talk, all right? There's been a misunderstanding." But she was already dialing, pacing back and forth in the kitchen, her voice sharp and loud. "Yes, there's a man in my house. No, I don't know him personally. He won't leave." I stood in shock. She was serious. She was really doing it. The rest felt like a blur. I stepped outside and waited on the porch. My heart was pounding, not with fear, but confusion. And something else, something colder. Hurt. After everything I had done, everything I had provided, I was being treated like an intruder in my own home. I could have shown her the deed right then and there. I could have ended it with a few papers. But I didn't. I stood there, silent, waiting for the flashing lights and uniforms, feeling a storm build quietly behind my ribs. When the officers arrived, I explained everything calmly. I showed them my ID, told them my name, gave them the address, my address. The younger officer looked uncomfortable. The older one raised an eyebrow. "You're the legal owner?" he asked. I nodded. He stepped away to make a call, probably confirming everything. Meanwhile, she stood behind the screen door, arms still crossed, defiant, like she had won something. But she hadn't won. Not yet. My son didn't answer his phone the first few tries. I left him a message, then another. The officers told me they couldn't arrest me if I legally owned the property, but advised I could keep the peace and avoid further conflict until things were sorted. I nodded and walked back toward the gate. I glanced back once. She was still staring at me, smug and silent. That was the moment something inside me shifted. I had stayed quiet out of love. Out of respect. But she crossed a line, and deep down, she had no idea what she'd just started. She thought I was just the old man next door. She had no idea the ground beneath her feet wasn't hers to stand on. Not legally. Not morally. And certainly not with that kind of attitude. I walked home, the air thick with the weight of what had just happened. I didn't sleep much that night. My son finally returned my call, and I told him everything. He sounded tired. Angry. Not at me, at her. Dad, she didn't know. I never told her. I didn't say much back. There wasn't much to say. Because this wasn't just about a misunderstanding anymore. This was about respect. And sometimes, when people forget who helped build the house they're living in, they need a reminder. And I was going to give her one. The next morning arrived heavy with silence. Not the peaceful kind, but the thick, uncomfortable kind that settles into your chest and refuses to leave. I stood by the kitchen window, watching the steam rise off my coffee, wondering how a simple act of kindness had twisted into such a bitter confrontation. It had never occurred to me that my daughter-in-law would see me as a threat, let alone call the police on me. But what stung the most wasn't the embarrassment or the misunderstanding. It was the sheer coldness in her eyes. The way she looked at me like I didn't belong. Like I was nothing. That I waited until late morning before calling my son again. He picked up on the second ring this time. His voice was quiet, weighed down by a pressure he probably didn't know how to express. "Dad," he said, "I talked to her. She feels uncomfortable with you being around so often." I didn't answer right away. I let that sentence hang in the air for a few seconds. Uncomfortable? I finally said, tasting the word like something bitter. For me helping around the house? For taking care of things while you're gone? He sighed, and I could almost hear him rubbing his temples on the other end. "She didn't know the house was yours, Dad. She thought you were just hanging around too much. She thought it was weird." I almost laughed, but there was no humor left in me. "Weird? Son, I built that house with you. You remember? I paid the down payment, handled the contractor, signed every paper with my name. I gave it to you, to live in peace. And I stepped back, let you two have your space. But she thought I was some kind of loitering neighbor. She feels like it's her space now," he said softly. "She thought she had full control of it. I never explained things to her. I guess. I didn't think it mattered." That silence returned again, crawling between us. "It matters now," I finally said. "Because she's crossed a line I can't ignore." We hung up without saying much else. I knew he was caught between us, and I didn't envy him. But I also wasn't going to keep pretending that everything was fine. Not after she made me feel like a stranger in my own property. I spent the rest of the day digging through my files, documents, copies of the deed, transaction receipts. I hadn't looked at them in months, maybe a year. But now, they felt like armor. Not because I wanted to use them as a weapon, but because I needed to remind myself that I wasn't crazy. That I had given everything with love, and had been repaid with suspicion. That evening, I saw her pulling into the driveway, stepping out of her car with grocery bags slung over each arm. She walked right past me without a word, eyes forward. It was like I didn't exist. And that was when I decided I wasn't going to stay silent anymore. I walked toward the porch and called out, "We need to talk." She paused with her hand on the doorknob, barely looking at me. "I don't think that's necessary." Her tone was sharp, final. "I do," I said, my voice steady. "You called the police on me in my own house. You accused me of trespassing when I've done nothing but help." She turned slowly, her jaw clenched. "You scared me," she said. "You came in without permission. You just show up and act like you own the place." "I do own the place," I said, calmly but firmly. Her eyes flickered. "What?" "I own this house," I repeated. "Legally. It's under my name. I gave it to you both to live in. I wanted to help my son start his life. That's why I never made a big deal about it. But I see now that silence let you believe something that was never true." She stepped back like I had struck her. "You're lying," she muttered. "He said it was ours. He said we were free to do what we wanted here." "And you are," I said. "But that doesn't mean I stop existing. That doesn't give you the right to treat me like some unwanted stranger." For a moment, her face shifted. Confusion. Doubt. Then anger again. "You should have told me," she snapped. "How was I supposed to know? You just hovered around like some ghost." I stared at her, trying to understand how things had fallen so far, so fast. "I didn't want to interfere," I said. "I stayed out of your way, gave you your space. But calling the police? Making me feel like a criminal? That's not a misunderstanding. That's a decision." She didn't answer. Just turned around and went inside, slamming the door behind her. I stood there for a while, listening to the echo of that slam, wondering if there had been a moment, any moment, when this could have been avoided. But the truth was already out now. And there was no turning back. That night, I didn't sleep again. My mind wouldn't shut off. I kept playing it over and over, her voice, the way she looked at me, the sound of the police officers asking me to explain myself. A home should never feel like a battlefield. But mine had become just that. And the war, it seemed, had only just begun. The days that followed were tense in ways I hadn't felt in years. You know, the kind of tension that doesn't scream or shout, but hums just under the surface like something waiting to explode? That's what it was like every time I stepped outside. I kept my routine, watering the plants, fixing the old shed that stood between our properties, sweeping the walkway like I always did, but now, I felt her watching me. Not out of curiosity. Out of resentment. She'd pull back the curtains just enough to peer through, probably thinking I didn't notice. But I did. And every time our eyes met through the glass, she'd vanish like a ghost. Like she couldn't even bear to look at me. It hurt more than I was willing to admit. What made it worse was my son. He called less and less. At first, I thought it was work. Then I realized it was avoidance. He was stuck in a house full of silence, trapped between the woman he loved and the father who had carried him through life. And instead of dealing with it head-on, he chose distance. One evening, I called him and asked if we could meet, just the two of us. No agenda. Just a conversation. After a long pause, he said yes. We agreed to meet at a small diner we used to go to when he was younger, the kind of place where the booths were worn in just the right way, and the waitress always remembered your name, that he looked tired when he walked in. Older. Like the weight of everything had aged him in a matter of weeks. We didn't start with the house. We talked about his job, his workload, and his plans for the next quarter. But eventually, the silence between us got too loud to ignore. I leaned forward and said, "Son, I need to ask you something. Why didn't you ever tell her the house was mine?" He didn't look up at first. Just stared at the scratches on the table, fingers tracing them slowly. "Because I wanted her to feel like it was hers," he said finally. "I wanted us to have something we built together, even if it wasn't really ours. I thought it would help her settle in, feel like part of the family." I let his words sink in. I understood the intention. But intentions didn't erase consequences. And did it? I asked softly. Did it make her feel like part of the family? Or did it make her believe a lie? His face twisted, torn between guilt and confusion. "I didn't think it would go this far," he whispered. "I didn't think she'd treat you like that. I thought it would just work out." I nodded slowly. But it didn't. And now, she thinks I'm some old man hanging around for no reason. She called the police on me, son. On me. In my own property. He rubbed his face, overwhelmed. "I know. I've been trying to talk to her. She's stubborn. She keeps saying you're invading our privacy, making her uncomfortable." I told her the truth after that day, but she just doubled down. She's embarrassed, and she doesn't want to admit she was wrong. I leaned back, disappointed but not surprised. That pride, her pride, was going to destroy everything. "You know what the worst part is?" I said quietly. "I never asked for recognition. Never asked for a thank you. I just wanted to help. I wanted you to have a foundation I never had. And now I'm the villain in her story." He shook his head. "You're not. She just can't see past her own image of how things are supposed to be." We left the diner without much resolution. A hug that felt more like an apology than comfort. And as I drove home, the bitterness settled even deeper. I had given them the world, and somehow I was the one being pushed out of it. The next morning, I found something on my doorstep. A note. No name. Just 5 words, "Stop coming near our home." My hands trembled as I read it. The paper was thin, the ink rushed. But the message was clear that I didn't know if it came from her or from someone she told the story to. A friend, maybe. A neighbor she poisoned with her version of events. But it didn't matter. That house, that space I had poured my money, time, and love into, was now a place I wasn't even welcome to look at. That I went back into my house and pulled out the deed again. I stared at my name on it, bold and legal. A reminder that no matter how hard she tried to erase me, the truth was written in ink. I didn't want revenge. I didn't want to humiliate her. But I wasn't going to vanish. Not anymore. The truth had been buried under her assumptions for too long. And now, it was time to bring it to light. The next week passed like walking through a storm that never broke. The sky might have been clear, the air still, but the tension in that shared patch of land between our homes, it was thick enough to choke on. I stayed out of her way, but not because I was afraid. No, I just wanted to see how far she'd go now that the truth was out. My son told her everything, and she hadn't apologized. She hadn't even acknowledged it. Instead, she doubled down. Closed the curtains tighter. Walked faster past me when our paths crossed. Pretended like I didn't exist even harder than before. It was like she thought if she kept pretending long enough, the truth would bend to her will. But it doesn't work like that. I knew pride could make people cruel. I'd seen it growing up with my own father, who never once said he was proud of me even when I was the first in the family to graduate college. Pride made people build walls where bridges should have been. And in her case, her wall was getting taller by the day. But then, something strange started happening. A few days after that note was left at my door, I noticed one of the neighbors, Janet from across the street, wasn't waving at me like she usually did. She used to chat with me while watering her plants, always asking about my tomatoes. Now, she barely looked up. And then Mr. Leon, who lives 2 houses down, who I helped when his fence collapsed last winter, he turned his back when I tried to greet him at the mailbox. It didn't take long for me to realize what was happening. She was talking. Telling people some twisted version of events, painting herself as the victim. I could almost hear the story in my head. An old man keeps lurking around our house. He won't leave us alone. He came inside without permission. We had to call the police. All technically true, but spun just enough to make me the villain. No mention of the house being mine. No mention of the years I spent making sure that house was even livable. Just enough poison to change how people looked at me. And it worked. The looks I got now weren't just cold, they were suspicious. Like they weren't sure if I was safe to talk to anymore. Like I'd done something shameful. At first, I tried to ignore it. I told myself the truth would surface eventually. But the problem with rumors is they spread faster than facts ever can. And it started getting to me. I stopped going to the coffee shop where I used to chat with the regulars. I skipped church that Sunday for the first time in years. I couldn't stand the idea of walking into that room and seeing those quiet stares, those whispered side comments. I stayed home more, started keeping to myself. I never thought I'd feel like a stranger in my own neighborhood, but there I was, isolated by the very people I used to help. All because she couldn't swallow her pride. But what really broke something inside me came the following Saturday. I was in the backyard, fixing a broken garden spout, trying to keep myself distracted. That's when I heard her on the phone, standing just on the other side of the fence. Her voice was loud, sharp, not even trying to hide the conversation. He just hangs around like a creep, she was saying. He acts like it's his house or something. It's getting unbearable. There was a pause, then a laugh, bitter, mocking. Oh, please, even if he did pay for it, that doesn't mean it's his now. My name's on everything inside. That's what matters. I froze. My hands clenched around the wrench until my knuckles went white. So that was it. That was her logic. The things she bought, the couch, the bed, the curtains, those made the home hers. Not the land. Not the walls. Not the roof. Not the thousands of dollars I'd put into it. Her possessions mattered more than my sacrifices. I stood up and walked away before I said something I couldn't take back. But inside, a decision was forming. I had spent a year giving her the benefit of the doubt. I had stayed silent to preserve peace. But peace couldn't survive in a place where truth was treated like a threat. The next morning, I called my lawyer. We hadn't spoken in a while, but he remembered the arrangement. The property was still legally mine, every inch of it. I had let them live there without rent, out of generosity, not obligation. I asked him what would happen if I chose to reclaim it. He paused, then asked, "Do you want them out?" I didn't answer right away. Because the truth was, I didn't want to hurt my son. But I couldn't let this go on. "Just walk me through the process," I said quietly. He explained everything. A legal notice, 30 days to vacate, all above board. I could even offer them extra time if I wanted to be kind about it. But once I took that first step, there was no turning back. I hung up feeling hollow. Like something sacred had been broken. I never wanted it to come to this. But she left me no choice. Later that day, I saw her leaving with a friend, laughing again. That same bitter laugh that echoed like nails in my chest. She didn't know what was coming. She thought I'd just fade into the background and let her rewrite the story. But she was wrong. I wasn't some passive old man clinging to the past. I was the foundation of that house. The reason she even had a roof to laugh under. And now, the reckoning she never saw coming was on its way. The day I signed the eviction notice, it felt like I was carrying the weight of 1,000 bricks on my shoulders. My hand hovered over the page for a long time, pen gripped tight, heart torn between reason and heartbreak. This wasn't just about property anymore. This was about dignity. About being erased by someone who never took the time to understand the depth of what had been given to her. It wasn't vengeance. It wasn't spite. It was clarity. I had kept quiet for too long, hoping things would fix themselves. But silence doesn't fix anything, it only feeds arrogance. And hers had grown into a monster that no longer cared who it devoured, even if it was the man who made her life possible. That I walked the envelope to the post office myself. I didn't trust anyone else to handle it. Not for something this personal. As I stood in line, I kept thinking about the first time I showed that house to my son. His eyes had lit up like a child seeing the world for the first time. He had turned to me and said, "Dad, are you sure? This is too much." I had smiled and said, "No, son, this is exactly enough. It's time you had your own place. Somewhere to grow a family. Somewhere safe." And now here I was, sending them a legal notice to leave the very home I built for that dream. The irony stung. But it was no longer a home, it was a battleground. The letter went out on a Tuesday. I knew it would arrive by Thursday. I didn't say anything to my son. I wanted him to hear it from the letter first. Maybe that sounds cruel, but I was done explaining myself. I had been quiet while she humiliated me, spread lies about me, poisoned my name in a community I had been part of for decades. If she wanted to act like the queen of a castle she didn't own, then she'd have to face what happens when the ground beneath her starts to shake. Thursday morning, I stayed inside. I knew what time the mail usually arrived on their street. Around 10:45 a.m. By 11:30, I heard the shouting. Not loud enough to hear every word, but the tone, that was unmistakable. Her voice, high and sharp like shattered glass. His voice, low and firm, trying to calm her down. Then came the slam of the door. A minute later, my phone rang. I let it ring twice before answering. "Dad," he said, his voice tight. "What is this?" I didn't even ask what he meant. "It's what should have been done months ago," I said. "You know it, even if you won't say it." He was silent for a long time. I imagined him pacing their living room, letter crumpled in his hand, heart racing. "She's furious," he finally said. "She thinks you're doing this to punish her." "I'm not doing this to punish anyone," I replied, my voice calm. "I'm doing it to protect what's left of my self-respect. I gave you that house out of love. And she turned that gift into a weapon against me." He didn't argue. He didn't try to defend her anymore. That told me everything I needed to know. "I don't know what to do," he said, barely above a whisper. "She won't leave. She says you're bluffing." "Then let her find out I'm not," I said. "And when she does, maybe she'll finally understand that not every kindness is owed. That not every gift can be stepped on without consequences." He came over that evening, alone. His face looked more tired than I'd ever seen it. Not just tired from work or lack of sleep, but tired from fighting a battle he never expected to be in. He sat across from me at the kitchen table, the same table where we had celebrated birthdays, planned barbecues, cried over losses. "She's not taking this well," he said. "She's blaming me for not telling her from the start. She said I made her look like a fool." I poured us both a cup of coffee, neither of us speaking for a while. "I didn't want to make her look like anything," I said. "But she did that to herself. I never asked her to bow to me or thank me. I just asked to be treated like a human being. Like family. And she couldn't even manage that." He nodded slowly. "She thinks you're trying to ruin us." "I'm not trying to ruin anything," I said. "But I won't be erased from my own life just to make someone else comfortable." He leaned forward, elbows on the table, voice heavy. "If we leave, we have nowhere to go right now. I've got debt. Rent is sky high. I don't know how we'd manage." My chest tightened, but I didn't let it show. "You had time to prepare," I said. "This didn't happen overnight. I've been warning you in every silent moment." And she ignored every one of them. I looked at him, really looked at him. My son. My boy who once held my hand crossing the street. Now a man, torn between two worlds. "You can stay with me if you need to," I added quietly. "But she doesn't. I won't have her under this roof unless she understands what respect means. And I'm not sure she ever will." He blinked, the weight of it all settling behind his eyes. "I don't want to lose either of you," he said. "But I'm starting to feel like that's not up to me anymore." I didn't have an answer for that. Because sometimes life doesn't give you clean solutions. Sometimes it just hands you a mirror and asks you to live with what you see. He left shortly after, leaving behind more silence than when he arrived. I sat at that table long after the coffee went cold, wondering what kind of future could possibly grow from the ashes of what used to be a family. The air was different now. Not just outside, but inside me. Cold, thick, like walking through a fog that pressed against your skin and stayed there long after the morning passed. I knew the eviction process was officially in motion, but I didn't expect how much heavier things would feel once the legal gears started to turn. There was no turning back now, and even though a part of me still ached at the idea of uprooting my own son, a bigger part had settled into quiet resolve. Some truths had to be enforced. Especially when someone decided to bury them under arrogance and entitlement. The next few days passed in a strange rhythm. I didn't see much of her. She stopped walking to the mailbox herself, started sending my son instead. And every time he crossed the yard to retrieve the post, he kept his eyes low, shoulders slumped, like he was walking through a battlefield strewn with invisible landmines. I didn't approach him. I wanted to. But every time I looked out my window and saw him dragging his feet back toward that house, I reminded myself that I wasn't the one who created this mess. I only chose to stop being a part of it. Then came the knock. Not on my front door. On my garage. She had never walked to my house before. Not once since they moved in. So when I saw her standing there with her arms folded, mouth set in that hard little line, I knew she wasn't there to apologize. She didn't even say hello when I opened the door. She just launched right in. "This is ridiculous," she snapped. "You're blowing everything out of proportion." "Over what?" "Because I didn't know you owned the house." I said nothing. Just looked at her. She went on, voice rising. "You could have just told me from the start. This entire thing, this whole drama, you created it. You made me look like a fool." I let her finish. I could see she wasn't here for understanding. She was here to reclaim control. She thought if she talked fast enough, loud enough, she could twist this back around. You called the cops on me, I said, slowly, the words carrying weight. You left a note on my door telling me to stay away. You spread lies around this neighborhood. And now you're standing here asking why I'm drawing a line? She rolled her eyes. I didn't lie. I told people what happened. From my point of view. That's not a point of view, I said firmly. That's a narrative you built to avoid accountability. You didn't just tell people what happened, you erased me from the story entirely. You made me into something I'm not, and now that the truth's come back, you can't handle it. She clenched her jaw. You're punishing us for a misunderstanding. No, I replied, I'm drawing boundaries. You don't get to treat people like they're invisible and expect no consequences. You disrespected me in the one place I should have felt valued. And now, you're feeling the cost of that. Her silence was sharp. She blinked, then glanced at the driveway where my son's car was parked. He doesn't want this. He's miserable. You're breaking up your own family. I nodded. He doesn't want this. And neither did I. But you made it impossible to live in peace. This house, this land, it wasn't just a property. It was a gift. And you spit on it. For a brief second, I saw something flicker in her face. Maybe regret. Maybe fear. But just as quickly, it was gone, swallowed by pride. She turned and walked away without another word. That night, I got a call from my lawyer. He told me she had contacted someone, probably trying to delay the eviction. But nothing could be done. The papers were solid. The law was clear. 30 days meant 30 days. Unless I decided to reverse it myself. I didn't. I couldn't. And I wouldn't. That same evening, I got another knock, this time from my son. He didn't even wait for me to invite him in. He walked straight into the living room and sat down like he had 1,000 things to say but no idea where to start. She's leaving, he finally said. She's packing her stuff. Says she won't stay in a house that's got your name on it. I looked at him closely. And you? I asked that he looked tired. Worn down. But in his eyes, I didn't see the panic I expected. I saw something quieter. Resignation, maybe. I don't know, he said. I don't know where we're headed after this. Everything feels like it's crumbling. I wanted to comfort him, but I also wanted him to see the truth. Son, I tried to do this the right way. I gave you the space, the time. I kept my distance. But peace can't survive in a house that's built on lies. She didn't just disrespect me, she disrespected what I gave you. What I gave both of you. He rubbed his eyes, hands trembling. I thought if I protected her, I was doing the right thing. But now, I don't even know what I was protecting anymore. I reached across the table and put a hand on his. Maybe now you understand. Kindness isn't weakness. And when it's taken for granted long enough, it hardens. That's what happened here. He nodded slowly, the kind of nod that doesn't come from agreement but from understanding you've run out of excuses. Before he left, I told him he still had a place with me, if he wanted it. Not her. But him. My door was open to him, like it always had been. He didn't answer right away. Just gave me a long, weary look. Thanks, Dad, he said, voice rough. I'm gonna need some time to figure things out. I watched him walk back across the yard, not like a man going home, but like someone stepping through the ashes of what used to be one. The final week before the eviction deadline passed like a slow, steady unraveling. Every morning I would look out the window and see the small movements of change on the other side of the fence. Cardboard boxes stacked behind the screen door. A half-dismantled bookshelf leaning near the trash bins. A moving van parked for hours but never quite filled. It was as if she couldn't decide whether to pack or to punish. I could feel her rage from a distance. It rolled across the yard like heat rising from asphalt. But I didn't engage. I had said all I needed to say. There was nothing left to argue. The clock was ticking, and time, just like truth, doesn't wait for anyone's comfort. That wise son barely came around. And when he did, he looked like a shadow of himself. His shoulders slouched, his words brief, his eyes always scanning the floor like there might be answers written in the tile. I didn't press him. He was a grown man, and I knew he had his own storm to navigate. But it still hurt. Watching him caught in the middle, torn between loyalty and reality. I wondered what he told himself at night. If he still believed protecting her meant staying silent. Or if the silence had finally turned into a weight too heavy to carry. It was on a Wednesday evening when it all came to a boil. I was working in the backyard, replacing a few cracked boards on the old garden bed. I kept my back turned when I heard her voice. Not because I was afraid, but because I didn't want to give her the satisfaction of knowing she could still unsettle the air around me. But she didn't come to argue this time. No screaming, no bitterness. Just a voice tired and sharp like broken glass beneath soft shoes. "I'm leaving tomorrow," she said. I turned slowly. She stood there near the fence, arms crossed, her eyes puffy like she hadn't slept in days. "I'm not waiting for the sheriff to show up. I'll go before it comes to that." I nodded. No smile, no relief. Just quiet acknowledgement. "That's good," I said. "It's better that way." She let out a bitter laugh. "Better for who? You got what you wanted. You're the hero now, right? Took your house back from the ungrateful witch." I didn't react. I had no more venom to waste on her bitterness. "I'm not looking to be a hero," I replied. I just stopped letting myself be the fool. She looked away, then back at me, eyes shining with something between anger and sorrow. "You know, I hated how quiet you were. Always there, always helpful, but never saying anything. It made me feel like you were judging me." I wiped the sweat from my forehead, leaning on the hammer. "I wasn't judging you. I was trying to make space. Trying not to overstep. But you took my silence for weakness. And that's on you." She stepped forward slightly, the tension in her posture faltering for just a second. "You never told me the house was yours. You never made that clear." I shook my head. "I didn't think I had to. I trusted your husband to tell you the truth. And when he didn't, I still gave you both the benefit of the doubt. But respect doesn't require a deed. It's supposed to be automatic. Especially in family." There was a long pause between us, and in that space, something shifted. Not forgiveness. Not understanding. But maybe a sliver of honesty. A crack in the wall she'd spent a year building. "He's not coming with me," she said quietly. That hit harder than I expected. I swallowed hard. "Where's he going?" She shrugged, her eyes scanning the horizon like she wanted to escape her own words. "He said he needs time. Said he might stay with you, at least for a while." I told him I'd go. Told him I wouldn't make him choose anymore. She exhaled deeply, like those words had been sitting in her chest for too long. "I'm sorry," she added, voice nearly a whisper. "Not for everything, but for how I handled things." I was scared. I didn't grow up around people who give without asking for something back. I didn't know how to trust it. I stared at her, unsure how to feel. Part of me wanted to hold on to the anger, the betrayal. But another part, the older, quieter part, just felt tired. Some things can't be undone, I said. But maybe this is where it finally stops getting worse. She nodded and turned away, walking slowly back toward the house that was no longer hers. The sun was dipping low behind the roofline, casting long shadows across the grass. I stayed outside until the air cooled and the sky turned that deep indigo shade that always made the world feel a little softer. I looked at the house, my house, and for the first time in months, I didn't feel like a ghost hovering around someone else's life. I felt present. Solid. Real. That night, my son came over with a duffel bag slung over his shoulder. No words, just a tired smile and a nod as I held the door open for him. We didn't talk much. He just sat in the living room, staring at the floor like he was trying to find a version of himself he'd lost somewhere in the past year. I let him sit in silence. Some wounds don't need fixing right away. They need space. They need air. And now, finally, we had both. The silence in the house that night was different from all the others before it. It wasn't cold. It wasn't heavy. It was peaceful, in a way I hadn't felt in months. My son had gone to bed early, his footsteps slow as he climbed the stairs with the duffel bag slung over his shoulder. I could tell he didn't have the energy to talk yet. And I didn't push him. Some things needed time to settle inside a man before they could be shared out loud. I sat in my armchair, staring out the front window, watching as the street lamps flickered on and the night stretched quietly across the neighborhood. The house next door, the one I gave, the one I took back, was mostly dark now. Only one dim light was left on in what used to be their bedroom. The moving van was gone. The porch was empty. The space felt hollow, like a balloon left deflated after a celebration that ended badly. There was no victory in what had happened. Just resolution. And even that came with its own brand of sorrow. The next morning, I walked outside and saw the last of her things sitting by the curb. A few boxes. A broken floor lamp. A cracked mirror that someone had half wrapped in a blanket. It felt strange, seeing pieces of her life discarded like that. I didn't hate her. Not really. I just didn't trust her. And those two things, I'd learned, didn't have to go hand in hand. My son joined me on the porch, holding 2 cups of coffee like he used to on weekends years ago when things were simpler. He handed me one without a word and sat beside me, staring out at the yard we both once mowed together. He looked different now. Not just tired. Wiser, maybe. Or maybe just stripped down to the version of himself that life had been trying to get him to see for years. I think she thought you were trying to control us, he said quietly. Like you were pulling strings we didn't know about. And I let her believe that. I let her believe a lot of things because it was easier than facing the truth. I didn't say anything. I sipped my coffee and waited. Sometimes people need to speak their guilt before they can even begin to heal it. I should have told her about the house, he continued. I told myself it wasn't a big deal, that it would just complicate things. But really, I was trying to avoid conflict. And it made everything worse. I finally turned to him. You were trying to protect her, I said. That's not a bad instinct. But protecting someone doesn't mean hiding the truth from them. Especially not when that truth involves someone else's sacrifice. He nodded slowly. I thought if I could give her everything, she'd stay happy. I didn't realize how unhappy she was with herself. The words hit heavy. And I could tell he had spent many long nights thinking about them before letting them leave his mouth. She told me once, he added after a pause, that no one had ever given her anything without expecting something in return. I think when you gave us the house and didn't ask for anything, it scared her. Made her think it wasn't real. That you were waiting to cash in that kindness later. That struck me deeply. Because that kind of fear, it comes from a life lived in scarcity. In broken trust. In survival. I didn't excuse her actions, but I understood now why she saw everything through the lens of suspicion. That I sighed and leaned back in my chair, the old wood creaking beneath me. Some people don't know how to accept peace, I said. Because they've only ever known war. And when something good shows up, they keep waiting for it to hurt them. So they destroy it first. That way, at least, they feel like they had control. He looked at me, his eyes tired but clear. I think she knew she was wrong. In the end, I think she just didn't know how to come back from it. She didn't have to, I replied. She just had to stop digging deeper. But she chose not to. The sun was climbing higher now, casting light across the driveway where the grass had started to grow back in the cracks. A fresh start. That's what the whole place felt like. Not perfect. Not painless. But clean. Empty in a way that was full of potential again. That we spent the rest of the day in near silence. Cleaned out the garage. Mended the old side gate. Cooked dinner like we used to when he was younger, eggs and toast, nothing fancy. We didn't need much. Just the act of doing something together again, without tension, without walking on eggshells. That was enough. As the days passed, the house next door stayed empty. A for sale sign eventually went up. I knew it would sell fast, the area was good, the bones of the place still strong. I kept the lawn trimmed, not for them, but because I still felt connected to the soil there. After all, I had poured parts of my life into it. Just because they were leaving didn't mean I would stop caring for what I built. Weeks later, my son began to find himself again. Bit by bit. He applied for a new position at work. Started going for walks in the evening. Laughed more. Slept better. He was healing, I could see it in the way his shoulders didn't hang so low anymore. And though we didn't talk about her often, the silence between us no longer felt strained. It felt understood. Respected. One night, while sitting on the back steps, he turned to me and said, I used to think that letting people go meant failure. That it meant I didn't try hard enough. But now I think sometimes letting go is the most honest thing we can do. I looked up at the stars and nodded. Letting go, I said, isn't giving up. It's giving the truth room to breathe. And with that, we sat in silence again, father and son, not as broken men, but as men who had weathered something hard and come out quieter, stronger, and a little more whole than before.